Hey guys, today we're diving into another truly horrifying case. If you want to support my channel, make sure to subscribe and stay active. It really helps me out. I'd be super grateful for that. Let's get started. 18-year-old Abby Steppach called her brother. Her voice was shaky, anxious. She said she was standing outside his house, then added, "I don't know where I am." Her last words were, "I'm gone." After that, no one saw her again. 2 days later, her car was found in a park. The ignition had a key in it, and inside the car, her phone, wallet, and personal items. But Abby herself was nowhere to be found. The police didn't treat the case with much urgency at first. It stalled. Her family began a fight for answers, a battle that stretched on for years. This story is not just a disappearance. It's about lives broken, about trying to pull the truth out of a silent wall of indifference, and about how the law doesn't always guarantee justice. Abby Steppach was born March 31st, 1997, in Little Rock, Arkansas, to Peter and Lori Steppach. After her parents divorced, Abby lived with her mother but continued to keep in touch with her father. Her family included a brother, Trevor, a sister, Harris Elizabeth, and a half-brother, Ethan, each of them part of her upbringing. A key figure in her life was Michael Jernigan, who became her stepfather after marrying Lori. Equally important were her maternal relatives, especially her grandmother, Peggy Hammond, who was a source of safety and support for Abby. At first, Abby attended a private school, Lisa Academy, where she showed diligence, curiosity, and active participation in class. But in her senior year, she unexpectedly switched schools, moving to public Little Rock Central High. That move, along with other events in 2015, marked a turning point in her life. From a young age, Abby showed a strong desire for independence and a deep interest in understanding the world. She was especially drawn to foreign languages. She taught herself Spanish, Turkish, and Hebrew, immersing herself in the nuances of different cultures, mastering phrases, intonation, and pronunciation. Abby had firm beliefs on many issues. She wasn't afraid to stand up for them. She could argue her point persuasively, and she cared deeply about justice. Abby was interested in fashion, experimenting with makeup and hairstyles. Style was more than just clothes for her. It was a form of self-expression. Her appearance changed often. She tried different looks, each one deliberate. Beyond that, Abby loved photography, nature, little details, city streets. Her passion for photography let her see the world from different angles, finding beauty in everyday things. She loved the outdoors, especially the ocean. Abby found peace in nature, and she loved sharing those experiences with her friends. She had a strong personality, kind-hearted, fair, and she had zero tolerance for hypocrisy. In 2015, she made a big decision. She wanted to live on her own. She moved out of her brother Trevor's place and started staying with friends and her grandmother. Her parents were worried, but for Abby, it was an important step toward independence. That same summer, Abby landed her first official job at a Foot Locker inside McCain Mall. At first, her parents were proud of her drive and motivation, but soon they noticed changes. She wasn't around as much. She became harder to reach. New people were coming into her life, and with them came a different vibe. The environment was shifting, and so was she. Abby was still vibrant and full of energy, but something was different. She was more defiant, more independent. Her self-confidence came with a growing resistance to authority. She wasn't afraid of change. In fact, she seemed to chase it. But those around her could tell something in her had shifted. Around this time, Abby started dating someone. Her family wasn't comfortable with him. They had a bad feeling. Something about the guy didn't sit right with them. They never openly argued with Abby about it, but the concern was real. Deep down, they feared the relationship might lead her into trouble. As her social circle changed, so did her behavior. Abby began to withdraw. Her world slowly drifted out of her parents' reach and into a private space they couldn't access. With the switch to a public school, she started skipping classes. The school notified her parents, but attempts to talk it out were met with resistance. Abby stood her ground. She wanted her independence, her right to make her own choices. Conversations about rules and responsibility always ended the same way, unresolved. Her parents didn't know who she was spending time with anymore. They were worried, but they were losing control. Even her close friend Danielle noticed something was off. The two had been tight since their days at Lisa Academy. Even after Abby changed schools, they stayed close. But that summer, Danielle saw the distance growing. They used to share everything, like secrets, dreams, fears. Now Abby had become guarded, withdrawn. She didn't want to hang out. Their conversations lost their spark. The emotional bond that once defined their friendship had faded. Abby wasn't just changing. She was disappearing into herself. What worried Danielle wasn't just Abby's behavior. It was the new crowd she'd started running with. These people were bold, reckless, and confrontational. Nothing like the friends Abby used to keep. They didn't respect authority. They didn't play by the rules. And they seemed to thrive on pushing limits. But Abby was drawn to them, almost like she was searching for something she couldn't find anywhere else. Danielle didn't understand what it was that kept Abby so close to that group. But she had a sinking feeling. These changes weren't temporary. They were permanent. By early fall, the tension was building. Abby was skipping school regularly. She stopped letting anyone know where she'd be at night. Sometimes, she disappeared for days at a time. Her parents were deeply concerned, but any attempt to set boundaries ended in arguments. Abby made it clear she wouldn't tolerate pressure or control. Her family began to realize that Abby no longer saw herself as part of their structure. She was living by her own rules now, and those rules didn't include them. For Danielle, that summer marked the end of their friendship. She kept trying to reach out, but the Abby she knew was slipping away. Every conversation felt colder, more distant. Danielle could sense Abby was chasing danger, even if she didn't say it out loud, and she knew deep down there was no going back. On October 23, 2015, Abby Steppach went to a party. Danielle, who had spent time with her recently, chose not to go. The crowd made her uneasy. It wasn't her scene. The next morning brought devastating news. Abby, visibly shaken but composed, showed up at her parents' house. She told them that the night before, she had been the victim of an intentional group assault. According to Abby, 4 young men were involved, and she gave their names. She was absolutely certain that they had recorded everything on a phone. She didn't go into much detail. She said she had been in shock, but conscious. She didn't talk about the lead-up to the attack, or much about the party itself. What she focused on was clear. The assault happened, and there was video proof. For her mother, Lori Jernigan, and her stepfather, Michael Jernigan, it was a devastating moment. Michael recalled that Abby seemed determined. She wasn't asking for advice. She was stating her intent. She wanted to report it. She was clear-headed. She was ready to take action. They agreed that later that day, Michael would drive her to the station. They didn't settle on an exact time, but it was understood. A few hours later, Abby left the house. She never came back. After that, any contact she had with the family went through her grandmother. But the incident she had reported that morning, it was never spoken of again. That moment, Abby's confession, was the only time she openly spoke to her family about what had happened. But the trip to the police station never took place. No official report was filed. After that conversation with her stepfather, Abby stopped coming home. She dropped out of school. Her connection to the world around her started to fade. Later, it was discovered that on the same day she spoke to her family, October 24th, Abby reached out to her friend Danielle. She told her she was planning to visit her brother and suggested they meet the next day. Her behavior didn't seem self-destructive. She was still reaching out, still making plans. It pointed not to withdrawal, but to a deep desire for justice after a traumatic experience. That morning, confession wasn't just an isolated moment. It marked a turning point, and for some, it may have been a reason to silence her. Even after opening up to her family, Abby continued texting with Danielle. She asked if she could stay over, like she used to before everything changed. Danielle agreed. For Abby, that night was a way to return to a familiar, safe space, a moment of comfort with someone she still trusted. Danielle later said Abby seemed tense. Her behavior was reserved, her speech had pauses. At one point, Abby referred to all this drama, but didn't go into detail. Danielle didn't push, but she noticed that Abby was holding back. She was guarded, like something was weighing on her, but she wasn't ready to talk about it. Later, Abby asked for help with a piercing. One of her old piercings had closed up, and she wanted to reopen it. Danielle helped. It was a simple thing, nothing unusual. Abby also had a tattoo on her shoulder, already healed, a phrase that read, "Each night leads to a brighter day." It wasn't impulsive. That line spoke to how Abby saw the world, with hope that even in darkness, change was possible. The next morning, October 25th, Abby left Danielle's place. She headed to her grandmother Peggy Hammond's home. It wasn't a planned visit, but Peggy wasn't surprised. Abby often stopped by unannounced. That day was calm. They watched SpongeBob, ate ice cream, talked. Nothing about Abby's mood seemed alarming. She stayed through dinner. Later, around 8 p.m., she said she had to meet her stepfather. She reminded her grandmother that she was still planning to go to the police. The plan was still in place. Before leaving, she hugged her grandparents and told them she loved them. She promised to be back soon. There was nothing in her voice or behavior that suggested she sensed anything was wrong. She seemed composed, confident, at peace. That was the last time Abby Steppach was seen by anyone in her family. The last confirmed moment in Abby Steppach's story was when she left her grandmother's house on the evening of October 25th. Everything that followed remains unknown. That's the point where the direct line of communication ends, the moment Abby officially disappeared. There were no signs that she planned to vanish. Nothing in her words or actions suggested she was running away. She told her grandparents she'd be back soon, but she never came back. That broken promise was the first real warning sign. The night of October 25th into the 26th became a turning point. Around 2 a.m., Abby's brother, Trevor, was woken by a call from her. Seeing her name flash on the screen, he picked up immediately. Her voice was panicked. She claimed she was standing outside his house. Trevor rushed outside, but the street was empty. Abby and her car were nowhere to be found. Confused, he called her back. She answered. This time, she said she was in her car, but didn't know where she was parked. Her voice was unlike anything Trevor had heard before. She sounded disoriented, detached, like she wasn't fully present. She couldn't explain her location clearly. She was rambling, struggling to make sense. Then came the words that would haunt him. "I'm gone." That was the last thing she ever said to him. The call dropped, and that was it. Trevor tried calling back again and again, but she never picked up. Her phone went silent. Between the moment Abby left her grandmother's house and that phone call to Trevor, about 6 hours passed. 6 hours that remain a complete mystery. Later, it was revealed that Abby made 2 calls to emergency services that night. Both were brief, less than a minute each. No audio recordings survived. Authorities later said they had no technical record of the calls. No stored files, no logs. But the family confirmed the calls had, in fact, happened. That detail raised serious questions. No one knows exactly what she was trying to report. Maybe she was in danger. Maybe she was trying to share her location. Maybe she thought she was being followed. But what's clear is this: her actions didn't match someone trying to disappear. They looked more like someone reacting to a sudden threat or a situation that had spiraled out of control. Her family acted fast. When they couldn't reach her the next morning, her mom and stepdad called her phone nonstop. At first, it rang. Then, it went dead. That shift convinced them something was seriously wrong. The very next day, they went to the police to file a missing persons report. But they were turned away. Officers told them it was too soon, that certain procedures had to be followed, that a set amount of time had to pass before Abby could officially be considered missing. Law enforcement leaned toward the theory that Abby had left on her own. She was legally an adult, independent-minded, and had recently pushed for more freedom. But her family strongly disagreed. This wasn't like her. She had stayed in touch right up to the very last moment. The total radio silence, the sudden disappearance, it didn't fit her pattern, and from that point on, the clock started ticking. Abby Steppach was officially missing. But the gap between how her family saw the situation and how the authorities responded would mark the beginning of a long trail of missed chances, though no one knew yet just how long the wait for answers would become. 2 days after Abby vanished, and on October 27, 2015, her 2003 Volkswagen Passat was discovered. A passerby spotted the car sitting in an empty lot near Chalamont Park, right by the woods. He'd noticed the vehicle had been in the exact same spot the previous day and decided to call it in. Despite his call, no patrol was sent out that night. Only after he followed up again the next day, confirming the car hadn't moved, did police finally respond. About an hour after that second report, officers arrived at the scene. The car was indeed Abby's. The key was still in the ignition. The gas tank was empty. The battery was dead. But there were no signs of damage to the vehicle. Inside the car, and in the trunk, were her personal items. A purse, clothes, her phone, her wallet with ID and bank cards, and a contact lens case. Abby had poor vision and couldn't see clearly without her lenses. The presence of her phone, wallet, and lenses, all essentials for daily life, suggested one thing. Abby never planned to disappear. She didn't take any money. She didn't take any way to contact people, and she left behind something she physically relied on. All of it pointed away from the idea of a voluntary disappearance. Still, police took no special precautions. The vehicle wasn't taped off. It wasn't treated as a potential crime scene. The inspection was cursory. The trunk was left open. And that night, a heavy rainstorm rolled in. Everything inside, including documents, clothing, and any possible evidence, was soaked and ruined. Later, Abby's parents were given her belongings, in the same water-damaged condition. They had to pack and dry everything themselves. Realizing the importance of what they were handling, they carefully photographed every item, hoping to preserve whatever might still be useful. All of it was placed into a bag and kept safe at home. Even after the car was found, the seriousness of the situation still wasn't acknowledged. No formal investigation was launched. No forensic team was called. No attempt was made to properly secure or analyze the scene. And that, many believe, was the moment that key evidence was lost forever. The items left inside Abby's car may have held vital forensic evidence, fingerprints, DNA, or biological material, but none of it was documented. No effort was made to protect or preserve the potential evidence. a direct violation of even the most basic investigative procedures. To Abby's family, this was the clearest sign yet that authorities weren't treating her disappearance seriously. A young woman goes missing. Her car is found abandoned in a remote park filled with personal items. There's no contact, no signs of a plan, and still, no urgency from police. The condition of the car, its remote location, and what was left inside all pointed to one thing. Abby had likely been forced to leave it behind in a rush or under pressure. She had no known reason to be in that part of town alone. It just didn't fit. From that moment, her family was convinced. Abby didn't walk away by choice, but even with that belief, the investigation didn't move forward. The car had been found, but Abby was still missing. Another missed opportunity, the first of many. Her family's home became an unofficial command center. Her parents carefully documented and preserved every item recovered from the car. Damp clothing, soaked documents, her phone, hygiene products, all packed, labeled, and photographed. But police took no action. No forensic analysis, no collection of samples, no evidence logged. Her family began to feel they had no choice but to step into the role of investigators themselves. Their contact with law enforcement was minimal, short, procedural responses. Every plea to elevate Abby's case was met with scripted replies. There were no interviews with neighbors, no questioning of friends, no organized search in the park where her car was found, no requests for surveillance footage from nearby streets. Her parents turned to the media. They posted flyers, asked for volunteers, contacted private investigators, but without access to evidence or police databases, their reach was limited. Day by day, the hope of an official breakthrough started to fade, and with every hour that passed, it became harder to piece together the timeline of what had really happened. The lost time was devastating. The sense of helplessness inside Abby's home grew heavier with each passing day, and it would take nearly 8 months for anything to change. It wasn't until a growing wave of public pressure and persistent demands from her parents that the case was finally reclassified. Abby Steppach was officially declared a missing person. That designation unlocked the ability to launch a full-scale investigation, but by then, it was too late. The trail had gone cold. Critical clues were gone. Witnesses, if there had been any, had moved on or forgotten, and evidence that might have told the truth was likely lost forever. In the spring of 2016, Margie Foley, the mother of one of Abby Steppach's close friends, returned to Chalamont Park. It wasn't just a casual visit. Something about that place had been bothering her. Abby's car had been found here, and just steps from the parking lot was a large, concrete drainage pipe that ran underground. Police had never shown any interest in that structure, but Margie couldn't shake the feeling. Something wasn't right. As she approached the pipe, an overwhelming stench hit her. It was sharp, unmistakable, the kind of odor that only comes from decomposition. It was strong enough to be certain something was rotting in there. Margie immediately called emergency services. An officer arrived within the hour. She pointed directly at the pipe and described the smell, emphasizing that it wasn't normal. It wasn't just garbage or runoff. The officer listened, but after a brief moment near the pipe, he stepped back. He didn't try to look inside. Calmly, he told her that storm drains in public parks often trap debris, standing water, and organic waste, especially after heavy rains. Smells like this, he said, weren't uncommon. He added that he didn't detect anything suspicious and saw no reason to investigate further. Margie didn't back down. She described the odor again, unnaturally strong, almost sickly sweet, and unlike anything she'd ever smelled before. She urged him to use a flashlight or bring in a K9 unit. But the officer held his ground. He insisted there was no sign of a crime and that no action was necessary. Without checking the pipe, he left the scene. The incident went unrecorded. No report, no follow-up, no agency came to inspect the pipe. No one linked it to the abandoned Volkswagen just a few yards away. Later, it would be revealed that the drainage pipe was within plain sight of where Abby's car had been discovered. Less than 65 feet away. All it would have taken was a simple look inside. But because of one officer's negligence, a potential key piece of evidence was overlooked, and the location remained untouched for nearly 2 more years. For the Steppach family, it was yet another crushing blow. A civilian, just a mother following her instincts, had shown more awareness, more concern, more investigative sense than a trained professional. This moment became one of the most painful chapters in Abby's case. The moment when what everyone had been looking for was right there, just feet from her car. A lot of time had passed, weeks, months, years, but Abby Steppach was still missing. Since the day she disappeared, her family had lived in a state of constant waiting and helplessness. Thousands of days passed in silence. No news, no leads. The not knowing became its own form of torment. Law enforcement and local agencies remained stuck in place. Abby's father eventually hired a private investigator, Monty Vickers, determined not to let the case slip into oblivion. Vickers began his work by digging into Abby's final communications. What caught his attention were the messages she had sent the night before she vanished. In those messages, Abby directly confronted several young men she claimed had assaulted her with intent. Her tone was firm. She said she was going to the police. She mentioned there was a video. She demanded they come forward. Abby made it absolutely clear she wasn't staying silent anymore. She was going to fight. And then, the very next day, Abby disappeared. To her family, the connection was obvious. Abby had confronted her alleged attackers, and not long after, she was gone. They were convinced it wasn't a coincidence. They believed the motive was simple: to silence a threat before it could speak. But the police didn't act on it. No warrants were issued to access the phones of the men Abby had named. The messages, which could have held threats, confessions, or clues, were never formally examined. The explanation they were given: there wasn't sufficient cause. It was yet another missed opportunity. Despite Abby naming names and making direct accusations, the investigation stopped at surface-level interviews. No one looked into digital footprints. No devices were seized. No one traced their social circles. The young men remained listed as witnesses, not suspects. Monty Vickers repeatedly pointed out the systemic flaws in the case: a lack of urgency, bureaucratic inertia, and a complete failure to build an investigative strategy. He noted that for 3 years, police had made no attempt to revisit these individuals, not even as new information surfaced. Those missteps froze the case in place. Then, in the fall of 2018, a forgotten detail resurfaced: that concrete drainage pipe in Chalamont Park, the one just feet from where Abby's car had been found back in 2015. 3 years later, police finally decided to search the area properly, and what they discovered would shock everyone. Inside the concrete drainage pipe, human remains were found. The location alone was alarming, but once the preliminary examination began, it became clear. The body belonged to a woman, and within days, it was confirmed. It was Abby Steppach. All this time, she had been just steps from where her car was found. Right there, in the same park police had visited. Right next to the area they had dismissed in both 2015 and 2016. The exact spot that had been pointed out before, yet never properly searched. Because of the condition of the remains, badly decomposed due to time and exposure, investigators couldn't determine a specific cause of death. The state of the body made a full forensic analysis impossible. The medical examiner could only confirm one thing: it was a homicide. The body hadn't ended up in the pipe by accident. It had been placed there, intentionally. But beyond that, there were no conclusive findings, no defensive wounds, no biological evidence that could lead to a suspect. This discovery changed everything. It proved Abby never just disappeared into thin air. She had been there all along. If that pipe had been searched thoroughly back in 2015, she might have been found then, with physical evidence still intact. If the officer in 2016 had taken the smell seriously instead of brushing it off as just a sewer, there might have still been a chance to determine what really happened, maybe even identify who did it. But both moments were lost. Forever. The discovery brought a kind of bitter finality. Yes, Abby had been found, but only her body, and now, officially, her case was classified as homicide. Yet even with that designation, there was no real progress. Investigators couldn't identify suspects, press charges, or present a clear theory of what had happened. Even those men Abby had named in her final messages, the ones she said hurt her, were never brought in as suspects, never questioned again. Her family was met with silence. What should have been the beginning of justice had become a legal dead end. No physical evidence, no access to key messages, no forensic timeline. The case was stalled, stuck in place. The investigation essentially was dead, and so was any hope of a courtroom trial. All that remained was the confirmed loss of life, without any path to accountability. Abby's mother, Lori, took the fight to the public. She spoke out on national platforms. She gave interviews. She appeared on well-known TV shows, including an emotional appearance on Dr. Phil. The family offered a $50,000 reward for any information that could help solve the case. The funds were donated by supporters, private individuals, and non-profits backing their pursuit of justice. Still, nothing. No new leads, no one came forward. Either those who knew something stayed silent, or loyalty, fear, and self-preservation were stronger than guilt. The public didn't forget Abby. Her story was featured in podcasts, YouTube investigations, and independent documentaries. It stayed alive through voices outside the system. But officially, the response was nothing. Everyone Abby had named continued living their lives. Some had families, careers. They moved on, free. Meanwhile, Abby's loved ones were left in a void, still grieving, still waiting, with nothing but unanswered questions and the cold, cruel truth that no one would be held accountable. Suspicions remained, but suspicions aren't evidence, and without hard proof, there would be no charges, no trial, no justice. That's how the story ends, with a truth everyone can see, but no one can prove in court. It's not justice, it's the absence of it. And that's the most painful part of all. Thanks for watching, everyone. Your support means a lot to me, and you can help my channel grow by hitting that like button, dropping a comment, and sharing this video. Your engagement really makes a difference. See you soon.